Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Monsters Den, the day after Halloween.
Yep.
I am Pete Pardo, and my co-host with me today is once again Mr. Rich Catino. Greetings, Rich.
So, thanks for having me back.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming. We got a special treat today. We're going to talk about classic haunted house films.
Yes.
There's a lot of good ones.
Well, not just classic. We did say we would take from any generation, so any era.
Right. But I think most of the ones we're going to talk about, regardless of the era, are classics.
They are, but I think I threw a monkey wrench in there. I gave you a surprise. So.
Oh, cool. Well, that's always good. That's always good. I mean, when you talk about haunted house films, we've actually been treated to, and I'm going to say classic again, because we've had some gems in the haunted house subgenre of horror films, starting back in the 30s. We saw them in the 40s, the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and they're still making a boatload of them today. We got the Conjuring films and all those. So there's been a lot of really good haunted house films. And I'd arguably say there are more solid to great haunted house films falling under the horror umbrella than basically any other subgenre. I think it's been a lot of really, really good ones, and some kind of mine similar territory. But I think that directors and film studios over the years have tried really hard to perfect the haunted house thriller and try to get as much thrills out of that as you possibly can. And I know most people who are on the fence about watching horror films.
Yeah.
You tell them it's a haunted house film, they usually will go for that. And they might go for that over like a vampire tale or a giant monster tale or something really bloody and gory, right? But a good, scary haunted house flick, most people like.
Because it's stuff you think about when you're in your house alone and you're sleeping.
That's right. That's right. When the lights are down,
yep,
and the wind and the rain is blowing on the outside, and you're walking around the house and you see these shadows and you're like, oh shit, what is around the corner there, right?
Yep.
So Rich and I decided to go back in the history of horror, and we each picked out some films that we like a lot that cross over the different decades. So I think we both kind of represented a lot of the different eras. So we've got 3 picks for you, and then we each have an honorable mention at the end. So I'll let Rich kick us off with his first choice.
Okay, I'm going to go with probably the biggest classic that everybody knows is House on Haunted Hill. And I totally did something sacrilegious, and I watched this version of it, the colorized version, which I see nothing wrong with it.
It's the same film, right?
It's the same film. I think, was it shot in, 60, what year was it? 62 maybe?
That's 2 or 3, yeah, early 60s, yeah.
Somewhere around there.
So we're right on the verge, right on the where everything.
So it could have been shot in color and then just released in black and white, because it doesn't look like it when you're watching a color version that they treated afterwards. I don't think.
Right.
It looks like all the natural colors that everybody's wearing. Sometimes they do colorized versions. It looks like it's like a wash over a lot of the shots and things.
Yeah.
But this I don't get that impression.
It's still the same film. I mean, arguably you could say that some of the best haunted house films should be watched in black and white. But I think that film is still really atmospheric and kind of creepy looking. I've seen both versions.
Yeah.
It's fine in color as well.
Yeah. So it's Vincent Price, who everybody knows. He's a legend in horror. He owns this giant house, which more when you look at it in the movie, like the box art, it looks like a house, right? But then when you look at the movie itself, it looks like an institute or something,
right?
Or like a compound. Like I never understood that part of it, right? It looks like where would these rooms be in that kind of a building?
True.
Never understood that one, But the posters and everything, it looks like a house. 2 different things. So he's got a ton of money. He's hosting a party, and he's willing to give $10,000 to all of the guests. And his angle is that people he invited, there's different things that these people need the money for. So that's why he invited them. It's him and his wife. He doesn't really get along with his wife. They have this very back and forth, I'm going to get you kind of a thing going on. And if they really do like each other, if they hate each other, or if there's some kind of angle with the money in it too. You don't know until you're watching the movie. So the story is that the house is actually haunted, and if you make it throughout the night, you win your $10,000. So as the guests arrive, weird things start happening, like the chandelier falls, like one of the first scenes when they're in the house. So you're not too sure if it's really haunted or if there's something going on, because he's going to give these people money. And he's got a contest that if you make it through the night, you can win the money. So the whole movie, you have to watch the whole movie to figure out what's happening. Is it really haunted, or is this guy scheming? So it's cool. It's not, bloody or anything really. It's got a couple of cool little scares, like the caretaker, the mother or the wife. I think not the mother, the wife. I think it's the husband and wife, I think, right?
Yep.
Like the one scene that she shows up, like it's so intentionally supposed to be a scare, but then you learn later what her issue was, and you're like, really? She looks like this, and then you're telling me that she has this. So it throws you a couple curveballs, while you're watching it.
Yeah.
So you finally find out that the reveal what the twist is at the end,
Yep.
what's going on. So it's cool. It's fun. It's got your typical, hidden rooms and doors that open up and things that go bump in the night and people are dying, who gets hung. There's a severed head that shows up somewhere. So there's a lot of cool, traditional, fun, haunted house stuff going on in this.
I think what you said, things go bump in the night, I think is like
Yeah.
the typical statement when you're talking about a haunted house flick.
Right.
Yeah.
But sometimes when you're watching these, it's not just a haunted house movie. The haunted house is a backdrop to another part of the story.
A total other story. Yeah, exactly. Which we might get to a little bit coming up.
Yeah. It depends. Some of them are traditional, straight ahead haunted house movies. Others are a little something different, but it's got the haunted house as part of the plot.
Yeah, that's the way to hook you in, right? It's like,
Yeah.
It's a haunted house story, or is it? But we're going
Right.
to reel you in with that kind of mindset anyway, even though we got this whole other subplot going on there, right?
But they still have the haunted house elements going on throughout the movie.
Yep.
But
exactly.
this is probably the most well-known classic, I would say, right?
It's a top
One
three.
of them.
Yeah, it's definitely one of them. Yeah.
One of them.
And he's great in it as always. I mean, Vincent Price is amazing in everything he does.
Yeah, he's so dramatic, always so dramatic and so dark. And the one actor that's in here, I forgot, I was looking him up before. Ellis something? What's his name?
Yeah,
I gotta look. I just had it. I just had it on my computer. I was looking at it. I forgot the actor's name, but he's also in The Haunted Palace with Vincent Price.
Well, a lot of these guys, like around that time period, were doing multiple films, and they depending on the production company or whatever would. I mean, Hammer's a perfect example. You have all these classic Hammer films, and like half the cast and almost all of them appear in so many other different films.
Right.
In fact, there's an instance in two of the films that I'm going to cover today, both from different eras, have the same actor, really young and really old. I had no idea until about a half hour ago. I was like, oh, that's right. And it's just weird how it works out that way, right?
Alicia, wait, sorry. It says it's Alicia Cook. Sounds like a woman's name, but it's a guy, Alicia Cook Jr.
Alicia, maybe?
He's the actor that was in this. And he's also in the Haunted Palace.
Wow.
He's the guy that's really paranoid about the whole thing.
Yeah.
He believes in the legend of the haunted house. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's a good choice. Yeah, that's an absolute drop dead classic. As is this one from 1963, produced and directed by Robert Wise. We're talking about The Haunting.
That was just on Halloween Eve. Friday.
AMC, maybe?
What was it?
I thought it was on AMC or something like that.
Yeah, one of those it was on. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, this is man, I love this film.
It's cool.
I watched it twice this weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is and again, this is kind of a very similar theme that we've seen the movie studios mine many times, right? So it's a story about how you've got an old house, like a long time ago, where you had some sort of death or multiple deaths, right, within the family, and then the house gets condemned for years and years and years, and then later on people try to buy the house or whatever, and they say the house is haunted, there's weird shit going on there, whatever. And then you've got these like kind of paranormal scientists and experts that come into the house with, and they pick out a team of people to kind of help them study what's going on there, right? And of course that never turns out well, right? Because usually once they get in there, they realize there's some seriously wrong stuff going on here. So here you've got you've got one guy who's the head paranormal expert. You've got one of the young heirs to the house, to the family, who comes in as well. You've got a woman who's a psychic, and then you have this other woman who, and she's kind of the wild card here, and that's Julie Adams, I believe her name, Julie Harris. Sorry, she's the main star here. She went on to star in, I think, Falcon Crest, or one of those early '80s kind of nighttime soap opera things.
Yeah.
And she plays this woman who previously had been the caretaker to her mother, her invalid mother, for like a decade, right? Had no life whatsoever. Her whole life was taking care of her mother. Her mother passes away. She's got nothing. She doesn't have a place to live. You know, she was living on her sister's couch. You know, she's got nothing really. She never had no boyfriend, no nothing, whatever. So she's got a real empty life because her whole life was given up taking care of her mother. So now that her mother's gone, so somehow the head, the scientist guy, the paranormal guy, reaches out to her and invites her also to come to the house and stay for a while to help figure out what's going on there. So they all arrive at the house, and you know, it's this huge place, creepy looking house, and little by little all these weird things happening. Like, you know, in the middle of the night you hear all these banging noises, doors opening and closing, all this moaning in the walls, and all this kind of stuff. And it's a pretty creepy, unsettling black and white film. It's not like, I mean, there's not a lot of action here. There's no gore what to speak of, but it's really unsettling. And what is a really interesting subplot to the whole film. And again, this is based on the 1959 novel, The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. So the main character, Eleanor, who's played by Julie Harris, she's not really mentally stable. Okay, so the whole film is like, you know, you hear like the inside of her thoughts constantly. She's like talking to herself through her thoughts, and you know, she seems to think as the film goes on, she's like, as crazy as all this that is happening, I don't have a life outside of this house, so it was almost my destiny to come here and spend the rest of my life in this house because the house wants me here, right? So it's like, you know, whatever spirits are in the house are trying to utilize her, and it just, all this weird stuff starts happening, and then it's got this really cool climax, which I'm not going to give away, but just a stereotypical creepy old-fashioned haunted house tale that, like I said, is part haunted. I mean, there is, you know, there's some haunted stuff going on there with the, you know, the dead family members and all that kind of stuff, but more importantly, you've got this really tortured woman who just trying to find herself in life after having no life for her first 30 years or whatever. And here she is thrown into this situation. It's like really the only thing she can relate to. So like that's, and that's kind of scary in its own, right? So, The Haunting, Robert Wise, they would remake this film many, many years later. The original is so much better. The original is just so creepy and atmospheric, and the house itself is kind of creepy looking too. There's a lot of shots from the outside of the house, which is neat.
Much more fitting house for that than they did with the house on Haunted Hill.
Yeah, I think so, because this really looks like, you know, an old, you know, rundown, creepy house and stuff. But yeah, pretty cool, and good cast in here as well. Most of the people in this film you've seen before. In fact, the guy who plays the young heir is the same guy who played the American male lead in War of the Gargantuas.
Oh. Didn't know that.
Yeah, I forget his name, but
nice.
I think, Russ Tamblyn is his name, and he's actually shown up a lot in more recent years. He's been in some Tarantino films. Obviously, he's a lot older now, but he's a familiar face. And the other actress is Claire Bloom, and she also, God, she's been in a lot of really popular movies in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So, you know, it's really good cast, really good cast. So, and this one has a little bit to do with my next choice, but we'll get to that in a couple of minutes.
So I'm going with another classic that everybody should know and has seen, the Amityville Horror.
Oh, yeah.
Which takes place in, I don't know if it's, how close is it to you? Because you're in New York. How close is Amityville to where you are?
It's Long Island, actually, so it's about 3 hours from me.
Oh, not even close.
Yeah.
Okay. So this stars James Brolin and Margot Kidder, who you guys know from the Superman movies.
Yep.
The classic ones. And so they move into a house, this house, the famous house, that murders happened. The father killed his family. So the Lutzes, they move into the house. They know the history, actually, right? They were told that somebody was murdered in the house. Yes, the realtor, I think, tells them, right?
And in a not smart decision, they decide to go in and move in anyway.
Right. They just overlooked it. They're like, whatever. Yeah. But that was before you knew the rules of horror. So what did they know?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So they move into the house and everything starts off fine. But then all the things start happening during the day and the night. That's what's cool about it, too. Weird things happen for the kids when the house gets blessed by the priest. That's a great scene.
Yeah.
When he tries to bless the house.
Tries.
So things happen daytime and nighttime. So they have, the time stamp, what day it is, what night it is, as the story moves along. The father gets sick. He starts kind of losing it. He doesn't know why he's ill. The dog, they always say that the dog knows when something's not right. You got to pay attention to the dog because the dog's way ahead of the curve in this.
Nobody ever does.
Nobody ever does. But they always say that even when there's like an earthquake or bad weather or something, the dogs or the animals, they always know ahead of time. So, so it's great. There's a bunch of good scares that are in this. The final, I'd say 20 minutes is where things really ramp up and you start to find out where the evil is coming from. And when it actually starts unleashing itself onto the house and what the family has to do in order to get out. It's a cool classic haunted house story.
I remember like the first time I saw that film, way back when I saw that in the theaters, I was like, why is it taking you all so long to get out of that house? It's like when they finally do, you're like, thank you, right?
Right. And you think that when the aunt shows up, who's a nun, when she knows things aren't right, she would have said something too.
Right.
She just lets it go. Like I never understood that part. You got a priest and a nun that come in there. The priest is trying to convince the rest of the congregation that there's something really wrong there, but they don't believe him. Oh, the one other priest, I forgot his name. He's in Jaws. He's the I want to say the mayor.
Oh yeah. Oh, I forgot about that.
What's his name?
I forget the name.
Oh my God! Yeah. But he's also in this. He's one of the priests too. He's trying to convince. He's trying to convince the other priest that what are you trying to do to try and convince us when that this is happening when you have no proof that it's happening. He's on one side and he's on the other side of his beliefs.
Yep.
So yeah, it's cool little fun fact.
Yeah, it's a good film. I think if you're someone who is like kind of growing up in the 70s and the early 80s, I think that the Amityville Horror was probably, I think for me anyway, my first exposure to classic haunted house. Like that's the first like real serious haunted house flick that I saw.
Modern haunted house. Yeah.
Exactly. Because what year was it again? That was
78,
79?
78, 77.
Yeah, something like that.
I think. And the story 79. And story-wise, when I'll have to tell you about it later when I talk about my other movie then. When it takes place.
Made a good lot of money and then spawned a whole bunch of sequels.
Yeah, that were horrible.
Yeah, that's the only really good one.
Yeah, and an unnecessary remake too.
Yeah, well, that's a story for another day. Yeah, that's a really bad remake. Really bad.
Like you said, it's a modern haunted house story for like people that grew up in that era that didn't even see like House on Haunted Hill or The Haunting.
Yeah.
A few of those because those were years before. So there were some gaps in there for haunted house movies before the Amityville came out in 79.
And that film has become legendary, not just for the film itself, but the house itself for people from Long Island because it's an actual house in Long Island.
Right, still there. And the tagline, I don't know if you can see it on the bottom, "For God's sakes, get out." That's a great line. Yeah. That's awesome.
What's taking you so long? Come on, man. Right? Is what's going on with the toilet not enough to tell you to get the hell out of that house, right?
I know. And then when the walls start doing what they do, it's like, all right, now it's time to go.
Yeah, exactly. All right, my second choice. I mentioned before it's somewhat related to my first choice in a weird way, and now we're going to the '70s here. So 1973, another British film. This one directed by John Huff, The Legend of Hell House, starring none other than Mr. Roddy McDowell.
Very cool box art and poster art.
I mean, yeah, this is like
I love that. One of my all-time favorites.
Absolutely.
That's the way you sell a movie.
Totally. Yeah, I mean that's how foreboding and evil is that looking, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again, so this is based on hell. So this was based on a story that the stories are almost identical. So basically, here you have a house, the Belasco house, okay, where similar type weird stuff happened at some point, and you got some deaths in the family and all this kind of stuff. All very suspicious, and the father disappears, all this kind of stuff. So it's like, what actually happened here? House is empty for a number of years. Then someone decides to put together a team of experts to go in and study what's going on in this house. Little do we know in the beginning of the film, we find out a little bit later on that it's not the first time that people have gone into this house to study what happened here previously. And as it turns out, Roddy McDowell's character was the only surviving member of that first team of experts to go into the house. I think it was 10 years before, 10, 20 years. I forget how many years were in between. And somehow, even though he was the only surviving guy and everybody else died in this crazy house, he agrees to go back again later on with this other new crew, right? And kind of similar to the Eleanor character in The Haunting, you also have a young girl in this, or young woman, I should say, in this film, who also seems to develop this real connection to what's going on in the house, right? So all sorts of craziness ensues. You got more of the banging in the middle of the night, and one by one people start dying in the house, blah blah blah, and eventually it all kind of goes down to well, what sort of evilness happened years ago with the Belasco father and the son, right? There's some kind of weirdness going on there, but a lot of really good chills here, a lot of real creepy atmosphere, and again, what's interesting is both this film and The Haunting were both British films. This one especially has a very hammerish feel to it.
Yeah, it does more, definitely.
Totally, right? Yeah. So and that's why I like it quite a bit, because it's just got this real vibe that's very similar to the Hammer films. And again, not much on gore, but a lot of kind of creepy chills and thrills and all that kind of stuff. The acting is good. And I think the ending is really bizarre. It just kind of like doesn't really go in a direction you kind of expect it to, but really enjoyable film, really good on Blu-ray. I highly recommend it. And this is one of those films I never checked out when I was younger. I've seen this in more recent years, and I really, really dig it a lot. So if you haven't seen it, Legend of Hell House.
It's been a while since I visited that one. Is there a little bit of a difference between that and The Haunting as far as like your payoff and the scares?
Yeah.
There is. Okay.
Yeah. It's like it's a similar premise, but they go in different directions, which is kind of cool. But it's almost like they start from the very same kind of premise, but then they take different directions, which is cool. So that's why, like, if you've never seen these before and you watch them back to back, you watch this first, then you see this, you're like, well, wait a second. That's kind of starting out the same way, but now it's going a little differently. So again, we've seen lots of premises where there's a haunted house, a bunch of people go in, they try to figure out what the hell's going on there. That's where the similarities end, and then it goes in different directions. So the only other real similarities, you got the two main characters, these female characters, who have this real connection what's going on in the house, and it's almost like all the evil that's happening in the house is getting channeled through them. So that is similar as well, but everything else about it is pretty different.
Cool. I have to revisit that. It's been a while.
I would highly recommend that.
All right. So I'm going to go with something modern. The Conjuring, as you mentioned.
Yep.
So I don't know how you feel about these movies.
I will say one thing, and I'll let you talk. That movie is probably the only horror film that's been released in the last decade or decade and a half that has scared me. That's the only one.
I chose the second one though, because the first one, it follows the paranormal investigation.
The first two are both really good.
The wife and the husband team of the Warrens.
Yep.
But this one I chose because this opens the story more, and it opens the universe more too.
Yep.
So this is still the same husband and wife team who are famous paranormal investigators, the Warrens. But in this story, it opens up with them going to the Amityville house, which I was talking about before. So I think it's like 77, 78 or 77, 76, like a year difference. So right after the Amityville thing happens, which you see the wife in the house when they do the seance, and she's there and she sees the husband kill his family. So then after that, then it goes to a story in London, goes to the present, where there's a family that's being haunted. So this family, the husband and wife team, they go there to try and help out this family. But what's cool about this is not only is it about them investigating that family, but the husband does a painting in the beginning of the movie of something. And that kind of opens the door to another element of the story. So it's not just about this family in London whose daughter is being haunted and the rest of the family is by some kind of spirit, but there's also another there's kind of like two subplots going on, if you notice, surrounding this house. So it's not just that family with the 4 kids. It's the wife and the husband who are also being haunted by a demon or a creature, whatever it may be, or a ghost. There's the element of the thing going on in the house. Then there's the kid. Remember the son who had the toy fire truck, I think it was?
Yep.
Pushes the fire truck into his tent. It comes back. He pushes it back, and something that opens up another door. So it's like this story, this chapter in the universe just opens up doors to other stories. That's why I really like this one. Aside from the scares and the bumps and the noises and things that go on throughout the house,
There's lots
it's
of
cool. It throws like the whole kitchen sink at you.
Yep. Yeah, I like those first 2 Conjuring films. And I'm
think
not
they
big
work really well.
Yeah, they work really well, and they're genuinely creepy and scary. And I don't find like modern horror, like horror the last like 10 years or so.
Right.
Don't find much of interest, unfortunately. I've tried.
Yeah, same here. Like the guy that directed this, James Wan, he did the Insidious movies, which I didn't find them that very great. They're okay, but not something I would choose to go watch. Especially because the first one had a poor looking demon that looked like Darth Maul from Star Wars.
Good. Not scary.
So I think the later couple movies were a little bit better, but this is a little more edgy. It gets a little more crazy. There's a lot of things going on as far as noises and sounds and lightning and bumps in the night and possession and blood, and it really throws everything at you. It's a really cool mishmash of haunted house elements.
Yeah, nicely done. And they've made, pretty decent amount of money. I think like old school horror fans have really latched on to that series.
Yeah. And the rest of the universe that I'm talking about, it opens up to the nun story and the Annabelle story.
Right.
Because the other part of the plot is that the husband and wife team have a kind of a museum in their basement, which has all the artifacts from all the different things that they go to exorcise demons or get rid of spirits or whatever they're doing in their business, and they bring those artifacts back to their house.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at that part of the house, if you look around, you kind of see little Easter eggs for other things from the universe in the background.
Yep. Which is pretty neat when you think about it. Yeah.
What's that?
Which is pretty neat when you think about it.
Yeah, I think it's cool. I think I'm looking forward to the next one. There's a new one supposed to be coming out next year, and there's supposed to be another nun movie coming out too.
We'll see. They're all these movies are getting held up and all this kind of stuff. It's like, yeah.
All right.
Let's go to 1980. Canadian film this time. We're going to go from British films to a Canadian film, directed by Peter Medak, starring George C. Scott and his wife Trish Van Devere, as well as Melvin Douglas, talking about The Changeling.
That's a good one too.
Yeah, really good. So I watched this one the other day, and I hadn't seen this one probably, I don't know, maybe 5 years or something like that. And I've forgotten how really good this is. So this is a tried and true haunted house flick. So the movie starts off, so you got George C. Scott and his wife and daughter are vacation. They're from New York. They're vacationing somewhere where there's snow. I don't know, you don't know where it is. Could be Vermont, Maine, I don't know, wherever they're going. And they pull off the road on this. They're on this like side road, and they pull off the road. They're having trouble with their car, snow all over the road. So they pull off the road, and of course there's a phone booth, right? And so George C. Scott's like, well, let me go see if I can call for help with the car. So he goes over to the phone booth, and meanwhile, the wife and daughter are playing, hitting each other with snowballs on the side of the road. So then you got this coming from one direction is this guy in this car driving too fast. The other direction is a dump truck coming down the other side. And what happens? The guy, and of course, where George C. Scott and his family's car is parked, it's in like a curve, right? So you got the guy driving too fast. He swerves, the truck hits him, they plow into George C. Scott's car, and the family kills them all, right? So he's sitting there in the phone booth, and there's nothing he can do, right? So so fast forward, so he's actually he's a musician, he's a piano player, a pianist, conductor, and he's from New York. So he decides to kind of move out of their apartment in New York City where they live, because he can't take the memory of what just happened, their house. So he moves out to Seattle, Washington, which is, I guess, where he went to college. So he gets a job teaching at the university. So he goes out there, relocates, doesn't want to get an apartment, doesn't want to buy a house. So he figures, maybe I'll just rent a house. So he goes and rents this like gigantic house that's been abandoned for quite a while. So he rents the house. Apparently it's got a lot of history, but he doesn't ask a lot of questions. He's just like, meanwhile, you're thinking like, what would one single guy do in this gigantic house that's built for like 20? It's like a gigantic mansion, right? But he's like, the lady who sells him the house, who's actually Trish Van Devere, who's his wife in real life, that George C. Scott and she are married. She's the realty agent. She sells him the house, and he moves in. He loves it. It's got a lot of character. He's got this big, huge music room. He's got his piano in there. They show clips of him, teaching the first week at the school, getting students, they come, they're practicing doing band stuff at the house, all this blah, blah, blah. And then, one night in the middle of the night, he gets woken up and you hear all this dome, 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 all this, weird banging and all this noises coming out of the house. He's like, what the hell's going on, right? So doesn't think much of it, but he's like, whatever, maybe it's the pipes, down the boiler or whatever. So he's got his handyman checking it out. He's like, I don't see anything strange, right? Okay. So, the next day he's standing outside on his front porch, and all of a sudden he hears breaking glass from all the way up top. And one of the windows from the attic, there's like an attic tricolored glass up in the attic. There's like this little window up there. So something from within hits the glass, and the glass all breaks. And he's like, what is this all about? So he's like, so that night, of course, he waits to do this at night, right? He goes all the way up to like the 4th floor, because this is a gigantic house. And he finds that that attic is actually locked with this giant padlock, and there's like a bookcase put in front of the door. So he moves the bookcase and all the shelves out of the way. He breaks the padlock, and he goes up into the attic, and it looks like nobody's been up there in years. And that's where that window was. And the window, of course, it's got the one pane of glass that's, broken. And there's this like little tiny desk, like a child's desk, with all these really dusty little books and things on it. And then there's this like tiny little wheelchair, obviously the wheelchair for a child, right? And he's like, what's going on here? So he's thinking, what's happening? I'm hearing all these weird noises. Did this happen with the glass? It only could have been broken from the inside. I find this room. So he starts talking to the realtor about, what's the history of this house and all this kind of stuff. And even like the little notebook and stuff he found had like a child's handwriting in it, as well as a name or initials. And the year was like 1906. So meanwhile, it's like, in the late 70s or 1980s. So he's like, what happened here? So he goes to like look and find information on, microfilm and microfiche on what the history of this house was. It turns out like a really rich family owned this house, and they had 2 children. And the daughter actually got killed in like, was hit by a truck or something like that out in the street. Kind of similar. His daughter and wife were killed by a truck, right?
Yeah.
So, but they also had a son. They had a younger son. So they had a young daughter and a younger son. Well, the son was like a cripple. So the son had all sorts of ailments. He was a cripple. He had all sorts of other stuff going on. And, but they say that the son actually wound up, they sent him off somewhere to get some kind of treatment. And he came back and he was totally fine. And now he's like a senator, a Seattle senator. He's an old man, but he's a senator, you know, a lot of money, you know, he inherited everything, blah, 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 blah. So anyway, long story short, George C. Scott's character and the realtor character, they keep like digging and all this kind of stuff, and the noises in the house keep happening. It gets worse and worse and worse. There's a really creepy scene where he's got this ball that his daughter played with back when they lived in New York, and he brought it with him to Seattle. So he goes and he takes this ball and he throws it in the river, and then like he comes home and all of a sudden the ball comes bouncing down the stairs in his house, and he's like, what is going on here? So there's a lot more than meets the eye, you know, without giving the whole plot away. It turns out that well, I won't give the whole plot away, but there's he eventually gets in touch with the senator who thinks he's the son of, you know, the heir to the estate and all that kind of stuff. But there's a whole other subplot line going on there. I won't give too much away, but a genuinely creepy story. Very well. I mean, George C. Scott's a great actor, really well acted here. And it's just like when the scene's inside this house, you generally get the feeling that the house is alive, and more importantly, the spirit of this little boy has taken over this whole house and is trying to use George C. Scott as a way to get his kind of revenge on everything that happened. So I won't say any more because you need to see it, because it's a really, really good story. But The Changeling from 1980, excellent, excellent haunted house. Again, no gore in it, no nothing. It's not really graphic. It's not ultra violent or anything like that, but just really, really moody and creepy. Really, really good stuff.
Interesting. I picked three that were a little more visual with things, and you went with stuff that was more subtle.
Yeah, I mean, all good though, you know.
Yeah, it's cool though. Cool difference.
So honorable mention time.
Yes. So I mean, you can't go without mentioning this movie.
No, you really can't.
Poltergeist. I mean, this probably is maybe the granddaddy of them all, I would say.
Yeah, very well could be. That brought like haunted house and you know, all that kind of stuff, the paranormal, into the mainstream in a big way.
Yeah.
Big way.
Yeah. Steven Spielberg movie. Yep. Everybody knows the story. Family moves into a house, but unlike the Warrens and the Amityville Horror, who knew the history of the house, they didn't know the history of the house until later.
Right.
Until all the bad things start happening, and then they find out what happened there, and why the house is haunted. But this has a lot of cool special effects when the guy's in the mirror and he's washing his face. That's such a great moment.
It's the best, yeah.
the tree that goes into the bedroom window, all the coffins popping up out of the ground when things start really going crazy that are under the house. But my favorite, and it gave me nightmares when I was a kid, was the clown and the kid's bedroom.
Yeah.
That's got to be the most. I remember when I was a kid, I don't know what age I saw this, but I used to stand at the what do you call that before you go into your room? Oh my God, that line when you cross the.
Oh,
you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Like when you get married, you bring your bride, or you cross the whatever the hell that is.
Threshold.
So you're at the threshold of my room. I used to stand there, and I used to take a couple steps and jump into my bed because I was afraid of the clown. So that's what impact this movie made on me.
And how about the little medium woman? I mean, she was like, her voice and it's classic.
Yeah, we tried to help the family.
Yeah.
But this has a little bit of the gore. It has the scares. It has the story. It's well written. It's well paced. There's nothing. I mean, this is really a great haunted house story.
It is. And, we really should mention too. So, that film is the brainchild of Steven Spielberg, who produced it and I think wrote the screenplay. But, got to give a lot of credit to Tobe Hooper, who directed it, right?
Tobe Hooper.
Directed Texas Chainsaw Massacre, right? And
yes. And Funhouse, another deep classic.
Yep.
So yeah, this is a must. Poltergeist is a must.
It absolutely is. All right, so I went way back for my honorable mention. So we're going back to 1932. So
Wow.
an old Universal film, directed by James Whale, the guy who directed Frankenstein, The Old Dark House. Starring, of course.
I started watching a little bit of that, I think the other day. Is there two different versions of that story?
There is. They also did, I believe.
Hammer did one. Hammer did one, right?
Yeah, and they made it more of a comedy. Yeah,
I started watching it, and I was like, when I was doing my research for our Hammer talks, and I hadn't watched it in a long time. And I started watching. I was like, wow, this is not really good.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the '63 film. This is so
Okay.
much better. So this again, this is to call this pure horror is kind of a stretch. Even to call it like a pure haunted house film is kind of a stretch. But it's got elements of both. So basically the film starts off. You've got this horrific storm happening like out in the middle of nowhere in the woods. I don't even know like where it's supposed to be taking place, but. So you got this couple and their friends who are driving through all this mud and mudslides, a storm, crazy. They don't know how they're going to survive this storm. And then down at the end of this dirt road, they see this gigantic house with some lights on. So they pull off the road. They go to the house. Of course, who answers the door? But Mr. Boris Karloff himself, right? And who can't even speak. He's just like, they knock on the door. He answers the door. He's like, right? He just looks just menacing. He can barely talk, right? So they wind up then the actual one of the men of the house comes to the door, and that's actually what is his name again? Ernest Thesiger, who plays Dr. Pretorius in Son of Frankenstein. So he plays the brother. So it's a brother and sister who own the house. They're both elderly, right? So then so they let them in, and then the sister comes downstairs, and she's like part deaf. She's like this cranky old woman, and she's like, why are you letting them in? They can't stay here, whatever. Whoa, we got to let them in. It's horrible outside. They're gonna die if they go out there, blah 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 blah. So you got these two this brother and sister who are both off their rocker. You've got the butler, who's Boris Karloff, who's who can't speak, looks real mean. He drinks a lot, so he's drunk through half the film. And then apparently there's a story of their father, who is like 100 and something years old. Everybody thinks is dead, but he's actually alive in the house. He lives up in the attic. All this crazy shit going on. And then before you know it, other people start showing up at their front door who are also coming in from the storm. So then you got this whole house full of people, right, who are just showed up here to get out of the crazy storm and trying to deal with this like really wacky family and this crazy house. And you talk about bump in the night and all this really dark and dingy stuff going on. And it's like I said, it's probably at its core not so much a haunted house story, but more of like a crazy house story, right? And because it's set in the 30s, and because of the scenery, the storm, the actors, the black and white nature, it's just a really, and it's got some comedic elements too, because some, especially like from the cast of people who come in from outdoors, you got a couple, couple of actors who are kind of playing a little bit of funny comedy roles here. But interestingly enough, here you've got Melvin Douglas, who plays one of the main roles in this film. He's one of the guests who comes off the street to stay at the house, and he actually plays the old heir to all the money who becomes the senator in The Changeling. And I didn't know this. I happened to see both names on the credits like today when I was getting ready to do this. I'm like, oh yeah, so he's like really young in this film and really old in this film, and almost like you almost wouldn't even recognize him, because we're talking 1932 and 1980. So there's like almost 60 years in between. But yeah, if you love the old Universal horror films, this is a good spooky one. I felt it just made sense to throw in here as like an honorable mention, because it kind of fits, but it's definitely definitely a classic, I think.
Cool. We forgot to mention, and it's probably another. It's not probably. It is another huge one. Was The Shining.
Yeah. That absolutely is. It's not so much a house, haunted hotel, right? But yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Another classic.
There's so many more. There's really so many more, and there's a lot of ones that have been done like in the last like 20 years or so. Quite a few actually. So, but yeah, it's I think the haunted house theme will never get old, and I think we'll be seeing haunted house thrillers like forever. And there's
Yeah.
so many out there that most people haven't even discovered yet. That's, you know, I mean, we talked a couple big ones, and there's more other ones that we haven't really talked about, but so many good ones, so many.
Like you said, even modern ones too. That's why I pulled out the Conjuring, because you know, modern horror doesn't get talked about enough. So, I think there's, within the past 20 years, there's probably a good dozen or so, I think, that are really solid.
Yep, absolutely. You know, 13
like
Ghosts.
The one I was,
13 Ghosts is something we didn't mention, right?
Yeah. Like I was telling you about Terrifier, which you have to see. You didn't see yet, right?
Yep.
You got to see it. It's wild.
That's what I heard. I heard the second one's going to be off the chain too.
Yeah, but this is a classic 80s style horror movie. So good. And the clown has so much personality, and he doesn't say anything. It's awesome. You got to check that out. There might have to be a show at some point, you know, a talk about Terrifier once you see it, because I think it's going to blow your mind.
Yeah, I got to check it out. I've heard great things about it, so I got to check that out.
Yeah, it's on Netflix.
Oh, it is? Okay. Well, I definitely got to check it out then.
Yeah.
That might be an assignment for me for next weekend.
That could be the next subject. I know we were throwing around a couple of them, like another Haunted House Part 2, or B roster slasher movies again, or you know, there's a few you could do.
There's so many.
The demonic possessions, you know.
You could do that. So many subtopics.
You know, it's a good question though. What would Evil Dead fall under? The Book of the Dead, the Necronomicon? What would we throw that under if you did that as a discussion for those type of movies? What does that fall under?
It doesn't really fall under anything. I don't know. Like because Evil Dead, there is no, you know, it's not a slasher film. It's not a monster film. It's not a haunted house film. Yeah, well, I don't know. That to me, Evil Dead to me is just like classic 80s horror. You don't even need like a tag to it. It's just classic 80s horror film.
It does have haunted house elements because there's things that happen in the house,
right? And
there's spirits that are there at the house that are causing crazy things, but it's because they read the Necronomicon and they opened up the gateway to hell. So I don't know, maybe that's like a topic, you know, gateway to hell movies or something.
Could be
something along those lines, you know.
I have to give it some thought because we got to cover those at some point, right?
Yeah, like you did when you guys did your Italian horror one, didn't you do
Gates of Hell?
You did the Gates of Hell.
Yeah, City of the Living Dead.
Yeah, but that was more of a zombie movie though.
I guess, but the central theme is about a gate to hell, you know, but it's not like the Evil Dead is like, it's this cabin, right? So,
right.
Yeah, interesting.
Which is what opens the portal to hell. So
yeah,
good topic to think about. Do some homework on.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Cool.
See that? I mean, here we are talking about all these potential other ways to go here in Monsters Den. It's crazy. So many different avenues we could take. So many great horror movies. So, but for today, it's all about the haunted house films. So, curious to see what you guys think of these haunted house films that we talked about today. Maybe any others that you might love that maybe we didn't mention that we possibly could talk about on future episodes. So we'll see. I'm
curious if anybody has any suggestions for modern ones, because I'm not too familiar with too many modern ones from the last 20 years.
Yeah, me neither. Other than, you know, the one that the series that you mentioned, The Conjuring. I haven't watched a lot of them. But
13 Ghosts remake, you know, the 13 Ghosts remake, the Haunting remake, but I don't know too many other haunted house movies.
No, it's been a lot of remakes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So tell us in your comments.
Cool. Sounds good. I'd also like to do a Stephen King film show as well one of these days.
Oh, there's so many, and there's so many that are not good.
I know. There's some that are really good, actually. Yeah.
Yes.
I find with the Stephen King adaptations, they're either really good or they're awful. There's not a lot that are like pretty good. They're either did a great job or that sucked, right? So to speak.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there are some that I like quite a bit.
So. Yeah, so do I. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, food for thought. So there you have it, everybody. A little haunted house action here tonight on the night after Halloween. As I mentioned a week or so ago, we're going to continue with these Monsters Den episodes at least a couple times a week going forward for the foreseeable future, because I think I like this format of talking about the films in short kind of summaries as opposed to talking about the entire film from start to finish, so to speak, because we can squeeze a few of them in. The triple feature thing is a lot of fun, so I kind of dig this. So that's what you know.
Yep, and I like the way you did the slashers. It wasn't just the main guys getting into the deeper ones. The B and C
There's
rosters.
a lot of those. Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah.
And as we found out, a lot of people who comment really like the kind of more underground slasher flicks.
Yeah,
there's a lot of people who like.
Yep. I saw that, and then there's a batch of them that were inferior ones that came out too that were just really terrible. I didn't realize how many were done that weren't even major releases, and they, like I saw one the other night on Halloween. It was something like It Goes Bump in a Night or something like that. One of those titles. I never even seen it before. It was on one of the TV channels.
No good.
No, it wasn't very good. I have to look up the title again, what it was, but something like "Twas the Night Before," not "Twas the Night Before Christmas," something like that.
Yeah, no, I've seen a ton of really bad slasher films over the years. There's this. But just like in any genre. Oh, and I almost forgot. Rest in peace, Sean Connery.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Did
that
not
was yesterday that happened, right?
Yeah. I did want to mention what a horrible loss that is for the film community, and what a great actor. Not a horror genre actor, but one of the all-time greats. I had no idea he was 90. I mean, it's like you blink and all these guys that we grew up watching are like they're just getting up there in age big time. So,
he was the original 007.
Yeah. So a big loss for the film industry. Sean Connery, rest in peace. But there you have it, guys. Haunted House discussion here tonight. Visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. Rich, you want to give a couple links while we're at it?
Sure. Metalasylum.net. I write for Brave Words, the Metal Hall of Fame, and the Am I Evil graphic novel with about the song from Diamond Head.
There you go. So Rich and I are going to be working on over the next couple of weeks, bringing you ranking the studio albums of White Lion, as well as bringing you our top 10 favorite power metal albums. So it's almost like a power metal 101, where so people ask, well, where do I start with power metal? So Rich and I are each going to give you our 10 favorites on where you should start. So that's coming up over the next week or two. So you'll see both of those in the next 2 weeks, as well as more stuff. So for Rich Catino, I am Pete Pardo. Have a good night, everybody. Happy Sunday. Happy day after Halloween. And we'll see you all during the week.
Oh, and I think the title was "And All Through the House." I think it was called "And All Through the
House." Yeah, I've never seen.
And All Through the House. I think that was the Santa Claus killer one I was thinking of. That was
another Santa Claus killer. Oh, okay.
Another Christmas theme one. I think that's what it was called.
There's a few of those.
Yeah. Yep.
Crazy. Well,
all right,
go check it out, everybody. So we'll see you all soon. Take care.
Yep. Thank you.
Bye-bye.